My sister didn't wait for dessert. She pushed her chair back, stood beneath the glow of the Christmas lights, and said, crystal clear, Dad's savings are all mine. She gets nothing. No pause, no hesitation. Just a public declaration meant to land hard. A few relatives even clapped. Someone laughed. I didn't cry or argue. I simply turned to my father, watching the light fade from his smile in real time. Dad, should I tell them what you told me? His face went pale. Sienna's voice cut in, sharp and panicked. Told you what? Before I share the rest, I need to know where you're listening from, so I know I'm not alone. And after you hear my story, tell me, what would you have done in my place? My name is Nora. For as long as I can remember, I've learned to take up as little space as possible in my own family. I work in a creative field in Seattle. Quiet, steady work that lets me build things with my hands. Things that don't shout over me or talk down to me. Out here in my small apartment overlooking gray city streets, life feels calm, predictable. Mine, it wasn't always like this. Growing up in my parents' house, I lived under the glow of a Christmas tree that looked warm, but never felt warm. My mom, Elaine Sharp, decisive, always certain, always right. She liked to say, Sienna, my older sister, was born dazzling. I was the strong 1 inch, which, in our house, meant the child expected to need nothing. If Sienna wanted something, it appeared. If I wanted something, I learned to let it go. My dad, Thomas, wasn't cruel. Just quiet. Too quiet. His silence wrapped around everything, especially when my mom's favoritism cut deeper than she realized. Or maybe exactly as deep as she intended. When I was 8, I remember wandering into his study and seeing him snap closed a small savings book. He knelt beside me and whispered, Your share will be safe, sweetheart. No one can take what's meant for you. At that age, I didn't understand why it had to be a secret. Almost a decade later, at 17, I understood all too well. I overheard my parents whispering in the kitchen, my mom hesitating, urging my dad to give Sienna everything they'd saved because she would need it more. My name never came up, not even once. That absence hurt more than anger could. Even now, years later, stepping into their house for Christmas feels like walking into a museum of old wounds. The living room glows with garlands and warm bulbs, but the air carries the same tight, brittle tension I grew up breathing. Sienna sweeps through the room as if she owns the holiday itself, dressed in something expensive, radiant, untouchable. Her voice rang with excitement as she shared her wedding plans with a cousin. My mom lingered close, nodding with pride, touching her arm, turning her name into the center of attention. Cattle must keep you busy, Mom said, finally noticing me, her smile gentle but her gaze already drifting back to Sienna. You've always managed on your own. Some people don't need as much help. Translation, Sienna needs everything. You need nothing. Across the room, my dad offered a brief, strained nod. A few days ago, he had called me just before dinner, his voice unsteady, saying, There's something I need to tell you before Christmas. Before I could ask what, he hung up. Tonight, he hadn't mentioned a word. I felt it in my chest. A shift, a warning. Something was coming. Something significant. Dinner began as it always did in my family. Too many overlapping conversations, too many voices talking over each other. Laughter just a touch too loud, as if everyone were proving something. I slid into my usual seat near the end of the table, the spot I always ended up in, as though it had been assigned the day I was born. Sienna sat at the center, where the chandelier light hit her hair perfectly. She loved that seat. She thrived in moments built around her. Tonight was no exception. I watched her adjust the napkin on her lap with that effortless entitlement she had mastered over the years. Dad helped us lock in the venue, she told an aunt, her voice drifting down the table. And he's covering the bigger expenses. It's going to be perfect. The aunt smiled at her, the soft, shallow, unquestioning smile people give a bride-to-be. Mom, seated beside Sienna, added, When a child is chosen for something great, the whole family rises with her. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. I felt the shift, then the first curl of heat in my chest. Not anger yet, just recognition. This pattern, this choreography, I knew every step. Thomas, my dad, sat across from me, pushing food around his plate. When our eyes met, he looked away quickly, as if making eye contact might reveal him. It triggered another memory. Sienna at 15, crying because she didn't get the lead in the school musical. Dad thought the director had made a mistake, and somehow Sienna walked into rehearsal the next day with the solo. I had stood next to him when he said, "Some kids need a little more help to shine." I had wanted to ask, "And what do I need?" But I never did. Tonight, I saw the same expression on his face, the nervous twist of his mouth, the guilt he pretended wasn't there. "So, Nora," Mom said, passing the bread but not actually offering it, "still working on those creative projects in Seattle?" I almost laughed. Creative projects, as if my career were a hobby I dabbled in between real adult responsibilities. "I am," I said. "Work's been steady." Mom nodded, clearly uninterested, already turning back to Sienna. "Some people just know how to build a future. It's a gift." The words landed with that familiar sting. They had never been conversations about my future. They were always the warm-up to celebrating Sienna's. Dad cleared his throat, a thin, fragile sound. For a moment, I thought he might finally mention the phone call. "There's something I need to tell you." But he only shifted his fork and stayed silent. Then came a faint chiming noise. Sienna raised her champagne flute and tapped it lightly with her ring. The whole table fell quiet. Even the kitchen seemed to still. She smiled. Polished, practiced, perfected over years. "I have an announcement," she said, her eyes bright. "A big one." A cold ribbon slid down my spine. I knew, absolutely knew, that whatever she said next would alter everything. Sienna didn't rush. She let the room hover on her smile for one beat too long. The same pause she used to make before tearing open birthday presents she already knew were pricey. She loved that moment when people leaned toward her, unaware they were being tugged like threads. "Well," she said at last, lowering her glass just enough to keep every gaze on her, "some of us were chosen for a reason." My stomach tightened. I'd heard versions of that line all my life, but tonight it carried a sharper blade. She went on about her wedding, the expenses, the plans, the investments Dad believes in. Each word was a reminder that Thomas, my father, had poured more into her future than he had ever admitted to me. I watched him fold inward in his chair, shoulders hunching as if he already knew what was coming and wished he could vanish before it landed. Mom clasped Sienna's hand with theatrical flourish. "Sweetheart, you deserve everything that's coming. You've always been the one ready to step into something bigger." The message underneath was unmistakable. I had never been bigger, just unnecessary. A faint ringing grew in my ears. Not anger yet, but the first solid formation of something that had been waiting for the right spark. I inhaled slowly, steadying myself. I wasn't the same girl who once listened from the kitchen doorway at 17. I wasn't fragile or uncertain anymore. I was the woman who had sat across from Ms. Reeves days earlier, going through notarized paperwork, signed transfers, and the legal safeguards Thomas insisted on arranging. Safeguards meant for me. Protections he hadn't been brave enough to speak aloud. He tried to tell me that night he called, his voice breaking. "There's something you need to know. I should have told you a long time ago." Then the line went quiet. Fear, guilt. I wasn't entirely sure what had happened, but one thing was clear. He'd been carrying a truth that terrified him, and I had secured that truth before anyone else could. Back at the table, Sienna lifted her glass again, as if claiming a spotlight. "Since we're all here," she said, "I think now is the perfect time." Relatives leaned forward. Forks hovered midair. Even the youngest cousins paused their fidgeting. My dad's hand twitched. Just once. But I noticed. "Nora," Mom said lightly, tried to smile. "This is a family moment. Family moment in our house." That usually meant a reminder of exactly where I didn't belong. Sienna's chair scraped sharply as she rose to her full height, basking in the chandelier's glow. Her confidence was absolute, the kind that comes from a lifetime of being told the world already belonged to her. A stillness settled inside me, strange, calm, cold, and clear. I wasn't here to fight, to shout, or to prove anything. I was here to end something. Sienna inhaled theatrically. "It's time," she said, and I knew the next words would detonate the night. She didn't hesitate. chin lifted, commanding attention like she always did. She declared loud enough for every relative around the Christmas table to hear. Dad's savings are all mine. She gets nothing. For a few seconds, the world froze. Then chaos erupted. Someone clapped first. An uncle who had always treated Sienna like a trophy. Another joined in. A cousin laughed. Glasses raised. Holiday music hummed like background applause. It all blurred, loud and distorted, until their cheers sounded like echoes underwater. I didn't move. Not because I was shocked. I was. But because something solid settled inside me, something steady, cold. Not fear. Truth. Sienna basked in the moment. Her smile stretched wide, triumphant, as if she had finally claimed her crown. It's what Dad thinks is fair, she continued, swirling her champagne. Some of us build futures. Some of us don't need anything. Her eyes flicked to me, deceptively sweet. A sugar-coated blade. Mom squeezed her arm proud. This is a big step for her, she said. We should all be happy for Sienna. Happy for Sienna. Those words landed as I was being told in front of everyone that my life, my work, my place in this family meant nothing. Dad sat rigid at the far end of the table, staring down at his plate as if the design on the porcelain could swallow him whole. His fork remained untouched, and his hands trembled slightly. The cheers around the table faded slowly into murmurs, then into a heavy, tense silence. I finally looked at him. Dad, I said softly, should I tell them what you told me? The room froze. A single ornament on the tree shifted as the heating vent clicked on. That tiny metallic sound was the only movement in the house. Thomas's face drained of color so fast it seemed like someone had yanked the light from him. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Someone behind me whispered, half amused, half confused. Then Sienna's voice cut in, high and cracking at the first tremor of panic. Told you what? She stepped forward, her heel catching slightly on the rug. Her confidence wavered. Just a little, but enough. What did he tell you, Nora? Her tone snapped harsher now. You're making things up. Dad wouldn't. He wouldn't tell you anything important. I didn't look at her. My eyes stayed on Thomas. Dad, I said again. Do you want to tell them, or should I? He swallowed, his throat bobbing once. Twice. Nora, I didn't mean for this to happen this way. Mom leaned toward him, eyebrows knit. Thomas, what is she talking about? Why are you acting like I told her? He finally whispered, voice trembling. She had her own share. I set it aside years ago, long before any of this. The table vibrated with quiet electricity. Sienna shook her head. What share, Dad? What are you talking about? He didn't answer. He couldn't. So I did. A few days ago, I began, keeping my voice steady. Dad called me. He wanted to tell me something before Christmas, but the words wouldn't come. I already knew it was serious. So I met with someone. Mom's eyes narrowed. With whom, Nora? My attorney, I said. The word cut across the table like a blade. Gasps followed. A fork dropped. Oh God, someone muttered. Sienna's jaw dropped. You got a lawyer? I did, I said. Because Dad wanted his savings and the assets he'd been setting aside for me secured legally. He wanted to make sure no one could pressure him into changing his mind. Mom snapped. He never said that. You're twisting things. Thomas, tell her you didn't. I did, he said quietly, voice cracking. Elaine, I did. I've been saving for both girls, but you kept insisting Nora didn't need it, that Sienna needed more. And I let you talk me out of it, over and over. My hands shook on the table, but I wanted Nora to have what was meant for her. I should have said it out loud. I should have protected her sooner. Sienna's face twisted, a mix of disbelief and fury. This can't be real. You're lying. Mom, make him stop. This isn't fair. Fair, I echoed. Is that the word you're using? She pointed a trembling finger at me. You took everything. You went behind our backs. You deceived Dad. No, I said calmly. I did exactly what he asked me to. Someone had to. Mom shook her head violently, murmuring something about betrayal and manipulation. But the truth was already out. It wasn't going back in. Thomas forced himself to meet Sienna's eyes. Sweetheart, I love you, but you've been given too much, far too much. And Nora, she's been left out of what she shouldn't have missed. The silence was heavy, biting. We've talked about this. Mom's voice rose. Everything should go to Sienna. She's the one with real responsibilities. And I let you decide that. He burst out, louder than I'd heard him speak in years. I let you make me feel guilty for wanting to care for both daughters, not just one. Sienna blinked rapidly, fighting back tears of rage. So now what? What happens to me? I held her gaze, unwavering. What happens, I said, is exactly what's already been done. The transfers are signed. The account is mine. It's legal. It's final. You can't do that. She shouted. I kept my tone calm, steady. It's already done. She looked around, as if expecting someone, anyone, to step in. No one did. Even the faint sound of carolers outside seemed to fade. For the first time, Sienna had no audience, no applause, no rescue. Only the weight of consequences. Thomas wiped his eyes. I'm sorry, Nora. I should have protected you better. I nodded once. You did, just later than you should have. A long, unraveling silence followed. One that felt like years of imbalance finally finding its level. And in that silence, something snapped. Not in me, but in them. The room didn't recover. Not the way anyone had hoped. The conversation didn't resume. The laughter didn't return. Whatever version of family we had been performing for years quietly collapsed under the weight of truth. Sienna slumped back into her chair, staring at her empty plate as if it might undo the night. Mom pressed her hands to her temples, whispering jagged fragments of denial, disbelief, and excuses that no longer held any power. The control she once had over the story had slipped away, and she felt it. Dad rose slowly. For a moment, I worried he might stumble. Nora, he said, his voice rough, I should have spoken up sooner. I should have defended you long before tonight. He seemed smaller than I'd ever known him. Humbled, worn down, I let fear guide my response. I'm sorry, I said quietly. Not with anger, not with triumph, just with the calm of someone who had waited years for honesty. Around us, relatives avoided looking at each other. Some seemed guilty, others puzzled, some embarrassed for having cheered minutes before. No one tried to make it right. No one could. I pushed back my chair and rose. The room felt stifling, overcrowded, weighed down by memories I'd carried alone. Opening the front door, cold air rushed in, sharp and pure. Snow was beginning to fall, lightly covering the walkway in white. Behind me, I heard Dad whisper my name. I didn't look back. For the first time in years, I wasn't leaving that house defeated. I wasn't fleeing. I was stepping out with what was mine. My portion, my truth. A future that didn't need anyone's approval. I've learned something since that night. Justice doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes it comes quietly, in a signed paper, a firm voice, or the simple choice to leave with your dignity intact. I didn't triumph by yelling. I won by staying still while the truth finally caught up. If you've ever felt overlooked or sidelined in your own family, tell me where you're listening from. Share your story in the comments and subscribe for more stories like this. You are not alone.